Good morning, and welcome to Sunday service, January 2nd, 2022, at North Chapel, the North Universalist Chapel Society of Woodstock, Vermont. Welcome to the new year and to our latest wintry weather. Welcome those of you who are nearby and those who are far away. Welcome to visitors and to regular friends. My name is Jenny Gelfin, and I'm your service coordinator today. The reflection will be by our minister, the Reverend Dr. Leon Dunkley. The first principle of Unitarian Universalism is, we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. This month, the reflections will center on this theme. Last time I spoke to you as service coordinator was the first Sunday in October this year, and it was our first time back in our sanctuary since the bleak winter of 2020 with the COVID outbreak overtaking us. And it followed a few lovely outdoor services in our Riverside Garden during the late summer and fall. It takes a committee with deep commitment listening to all the relevant issues to make the decision about how to keep ourselves safe and yet ensure the ongoing nurturing connection of our community, which many of us fiercely cherish. And we've arrived at 2022. Did you ring in the new year some special way? I think most of us have wishes for this new year, and one of mine is that soon again it will be safe and we can gather again in our sanctuary, present with each other. After the flurry of holiday special events, it's lovely to return to a slower pace. The church website, northchapelvt.org, and our weekly e-newsletter announce many happenings with our church. I have two to share today. The third Social Justice Film Series discussion group will be on Zoom next Sunday, January 9th at 4:30 p.m. The film is entitled Beyond the Politics of Life and Choice, a new conversation about abortion. The discussion will be facilitated by filmmaker Ann McSood and Clara Jimenez. It will be open to the North Chapel community only. There's information on our website and a link to the movie in Touch. A link to the discussion on Zoom will be available next week. We hope you will join us. Also, this legal notice. The annual meeting of the North Universalist Chapel Society will be held on Sunday, January 30th at 11:30 a.m. for the purpose of electing new members of the board per the organization's bylaws and to transact other business of the society. The meeting will be conducted in the sanctuary, everyone masked and socially distanced, and or by Zoom. A link to the meeting will be available on Friday, January 28th, 2022, on our website and sent out to the congregation by email. When we have snow on the ground, the winter light seems brighter. Absent the leaves, I get to see the long views and some wondrously subtle hues in the woods, the trees, the fields. The cold can be invigorating. I think the longer nights lead us to take much needed rest. Perhaps not often enough, I pause, bundled up, to take in the beauty around me before I move on towards somewhere else. How about you? The rest of the Northern Hemisphere is also deep in winter, but we're beginning our slow progress towards spring. Can you feel it? Please join me in singing our opening hymn, Ring Out Wild Bells.
My name is Laura Foley, and it's good to see you again. It's been a while. I wanted to share with you a poem today. I'm here in South Pomfret, Vermont. The poem is called Sliding Doors. It happens every time if you let it. You forget every time too. The dog sniffs the air, then relaxes, curled on stones by your side. The brook chatters below, but you don't hear it. It happens after sitting that seems long, even to patience, until it suddenly doesn't. When you start to hear the owl in a distant pine, the wren, the chickadees, one to another across the dark forest, the mournful doves, you know all of it was waiting, as it always is, the lovely gray sky, that vast emptiness, beginning to open it, the infinite inside you. Every time, too, times every two, the dog sniffs if you let it, you let it. You forget the dark forest, the mournful doves, the dove full mourning. All of it weighted like gray sky, that vast emptiness chattering below space we don't know how to hear, any more than pines, the wren, stones by your side, by your side. The brook airs and relaxes, curled by sitting and waiting, waiting and sitting. When it happens, any sense of patience evaporates like would-be rain. As you drown in sound, the owl and the chickadees, one to another across the dark forest. It happens every time, it always is, every lovely.
Sing to me, my moaning bird, the sweetest song I've ever heard. Love's melody in your heart's own words. Sing to me, my moaning bird. When the sun comes over the mountain, just to hear you sing your song. When all the stars lay down in heaven to take their rest, when evening comes, please don't fly away from me without leaving me with your song. For the morning can feel so lonely and so quiet when you're gone. So sing to me, my moaning bird, the sweetest song I've ever heard. Love's melody in your heart's own words. Sing to me, my moaning bird. Sing to me, my morning bird.
Make this world as simple as you can, but no simpler. A wise woman once said these words to me. The complexity of the world can be scary, so I understand what she's saying, but it's important that we turn towards our fear. Baldwin reminds us, if you are afraid of something, he said, soften your belly and turn toward it. That's courage. Good morning and good Sunday. I hope that this new day finds you well. Today is Sunday, January the 2nd, and the title of this morning's reflection is All, A-L-L, just the one word. It is a reflection on the spiritual principle of universal inclusion. It's about spy novels and nature. It's about learning to radically accept ourselves. It's a reflection on the first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Welcome to everyone, no exceptions. Welcome to all of us who are given in care and compassion for one another soul level deep, in good times and in tempest, in conflict and in consensus. We are held, whole, and honored by a love that knows no bounds. To all souls, I say, good morning. It's good to be together. Question. How cool do you think that Elvis is? Now, before you answer, I should tell you where I'm coming from. I have to tell you which Elvis I'm actually talking about, because there are many. There is, of course, the obvious Elvis, the famous one, Elvis Presley. Early in his career, he was surprised by his own popularity. Now, I didn't have a great fondness for Elvis Presley when I was growing up, but I've come to really love him over time, and it was this interview that changed my mind. In the interview, he said that he didn't understand what was happening to him. He just knew that through his music, he was breaking free of something that he could not name. I really respected that. It made him sort of heroic for me. There's also the one they call Elvis out in California. Elvis is an Elvis impersonator with Latin roots. He's in his 60s now, hails from Chula Vista. He's hilarious. And there's an artist named Elvis Costello, who's a wonderful writer of songs. Which of these Elvises do I mean? Which one am I talking about? Because behind door number 1 is the famous Elvis, the one from Memphis, Tennessee. Behind door number 2 is Elvis, the Elvis impersonator with Latin roots from Chula Vista. And behind door number 3 is the Elvis who is my second favorite Elvis, the Elvis Costello who wrote such beautiful songs back in the day. Strangely enough, I'm not talking about any of these Elvises. The Elvis that I'm talking about is Czechoslovakian. He is a high-level philosopher and an intellectual. His name is Slavoj Žižek. His friends and his colleagues refer to him as the Elvis of philosophy. Now, I don't know what that actually means, but I like the way it sounds. Slavoj Žižek is a disheveled guy. He's bearded and boisterous and brilliant. The Elvis of philosophy. He must have done something to earn that title. Žižek is smart, he is courageous. I wish I had a fraction of his brilliance. I wish I were as smart as he is, but I'm just getting started, young among the journeymen on the road to philosophy. It feels that way sometimes, but I appreciate the feeling these days. I don't know why this is, but life seems to have a little shine on it, a little glint. There's something hopeful, even against the odds, even in the time of despair with all the challenges and the difficulties that we face. There still is something beautiful in the air, and I appreciate that. Now, I may be a beginner in the realm of philosophy, but Slavoj Žižek certainly is not. He's been around for a while. In 2008, he wrote a book called In Defense of Lost Causes. This book has always fascinated me. Now, in this book, he talks about spy novels. He talks about how spy novels don't even try to present a balanced view of things. They have obvious good guys and obvious bad guys. The good guys are interesting, vulnerable, and complex. The bad guys are one-dimensional, and we can't really learn that much about them. Žižek says it takes real courage to see more deeply than this, to see in more complex ways, to imagine that those who are different from us are not bad or wrong or overly simplified. Now, on the final pages of his book entitled The Courage to Be, a theologian named Paul Tillich wrote words that are beautiful and strange, mysterious. He wrote, "The courage to be is rooted in the God who appears when God has disappeared in anxiety and doubt." Now, I like this because it's easy to talk about anxiety and doubt. We're comfortable with that. But talking about the spirit within us that emerges in these times is more difficult and more challenging for me. Now, Tillich had German roots. He saw the rise of Hitler in real time. When Tillich talks about courage, he does so against the backdrop of the Second World War. His theology was not esoteric, not intellectual. It was not an abstraction. It was real. It was historically situated. Like all of us, or like most of us, Tillich was imprisoned by his time. He was limited. He could no more escape the trappings of the 20th century than can any of us escape the trappings of the times in which we live. What Tillich could escape, and did escape, however, was the downward forces of despair. He found a way to speak of courage against the odds and against the grain. He fought on in life. He fought on in the life of spirit to make real the meaningful tenets of his faith. Now, he was not a Unitarian, he was not a Universalist, but that didn't matter. He fought on to achieve a quality of faith that is deeper than denomination. He never surrendered the ability to see the good in other people. He never surrendered the ability to see the good within himself. Zizek, the Elvis of philosophy, encourages us to do the same. None of us need to surrender the ability, this practice of seeing the worth and dignity in everyone around us. The whole world changes when we see the world this way. It changes, and it looks exactly and precisely the same. It's we who are deeper somehow. It's we who have changed. Now, Peter Gomes once wrote about Tillich, and he wrote in a very confusing way. He wrote, absolute faith for Tillich, this is a quote, "Absolute faith for Tillich is the ultimate courage, for it takes the radical doubt, the doubt about God, into itself, and it transcends the theistic idea of God. Modernity has been able to unhorse the God, small g, of theism." Let me say that again. Modernity has been able to unhorse the God of theism. This is confusing, confounding. I wish that Peter Gomes could simplify his language, but what I hear him saying is that even in the midst of great trouble, or especially at times of greatest struggle, when all things seem to fall away, when our ideas of the holy or the order of things is gone, that something more beautiful is possible, if only we have the courage to stay the course and to let it reveal itself. Now, theology for people like Gomes and Tillich was like a contact sport. They wrestled. They really struggled. They put themselves hard to the task, trying to make real and meaningful the messy world in which we live. There is so much spiritual doubt in the world these days. It's been this way for a while. And it may be that Gomes had named it when he said that God seems to have been unhorsed. But people like Gomes and Tillich were not alone. In the ivory tower, a guy named Friedrich Nietzsche famously proclaimed that God is dead. Nietzsche was no Elvis, but he did well enough for himself on the popular stage. John Lennon once said that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus. Now, he got in trouble for saying what he did, but he said it nevertheless. Now, a lot of people didn't like what Nietzsche or Lenin's were saying, but their words were just reflections of the spiritual doubt that was all around them. They got in trouble for naming it, but it was there nevertheless. We made villains of them if we needed to for a while. We made villains of them when we didn't want to take in what they were saying, when it scared us. We avoided it and we made them enemies. It's very easy to make someone an enemy, especially when an enemy is just an illusion that we create in order to avoid the things that really scare us. It's easier to be angry than it is to be afraid. But as James Baldwin said, if you are afraid of something, soften your belly and turn toward it. Now, I'm afraid to talk about theology, but here I go. Talking about God and Jesus seems to be scary these days, and the people who are doing it loudly seem wholly unhinged half the time. Too often, we've done a poor job of talking about God and Jesus ourselves. We've done a poor job of describing the Son who died, the Son who gave his life for us, as they say. We argue over and we struggle with and we feel guilty about what happened to him. Sometimes, far more often, we find it easy to argue and to struggle and to feel guilty than it is to love thy neighbor as thyself. We've done a poor job of describing the father figure who is constantly watching. Cloud-born and bearded, we imagine him as male. We imagine him as white, like a thinner, more masculine Santa. Forgetting that their formulations of the holy are always incomplete, forgetting that if we compiled all of our formulations, they would still be incomplete. We have trouble thinking about things at the scale in which they actually exist. We have trouble with the idea of magnitude. We often think on far too small a scale. A teacher of mine, Sheikh Yasir Chadli, would tell an interesting story. He would say, the angel Gabriel had 50,000 wings, and the tiniest feather on the tiniest wing could crush the Himalayas. His was a lesson in magnitude. It was an experiment in humility. It was a chance to recognize how small and how miraculously powerful we truly are. Open mine eyes, that I can see the glimpses of truth that thou hast for me. Open my eyes and illumine me, Spirit divine. In these words, the prayer is obvious, but even in more common poetry, the prayer is there. A poet writes, I walked out this morning, and it was like a veil had been removed from before my eyes. For the first time I saw the work of heaven in the line where the hills have been married to the sky. And all around me, every blade of singing grass was calling out your name, saying that our love would always last. If nature is red in tooth and claw, like winter's freeze and summer's thaw, then the wounds that she gave me are the wounds that will heal me. And we'd be like the moon and sun, and when our courtly dance had run its course across the sky, then together we would lie. And out of the confusion where the river meets the sea, something new would arrive, something better would arrive. I was brought to my senses. I was blind, but now I can see that every signpost in nature says, you belong to me. You belong to me. Who is this you that the poet is talking about? Who is this you that's mentioned in this song? The you with whom we are soon to be reunited. The you to whom the blades of grass are singing and calling out. The you who belongs to us, just as the river belongs to the sea. I used to hear the song more differently than I hear it now. Now I hear it as a way to be one with all things that surround us, a way of finding humility, a way of seeing good in ourselves. Now, when I reflect upon the idea of the inherent worth and dignity of every human being, it's obvious to me that the first step in living out this principle is coming to the radical belief, the radical notion of accepting oneself. When we accept ourselves entirely, the idea that we are not all as special and as brilliant and as beautiful as we are ourselves. We can't do it unless we accept ourselves first. Once we accept ourselves, it is so easy to see that light reflected in those around us. It is so easy to see our own beauty reflected in one another's eyes, and it is not arrogance to do so. It's humility and honesty. It's ridiculous to imagine that we are not as beautiful as the sun, the moon, the stars. The first principle of Unitarian Universalism is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. This first principle of the current set of 7 was formally adopted in 1985. It isn't a litmus test. It functions more as a beautiful guide on the spiritual journey. It is a signpost. in the course of our becoming, it helps us grow. It opens the unusual door that allows us to become more wholehearted over time. James Baldwin once said, "The day will come when you will trust me more than you do now, when you will trust you more than you do now. We can trust each other." I really do believe in the New Jerusalem. I really do believe that we can become better than we are. I know we can. It's just that the price is enormous, and we are not yet willing to pay. In Willing to Fight, a song that was written by Ani DeFranco, she writes, "I know that the biggest crime is just to throw up your hands and say this has nothing to do with me. I just want to live as comfortably as I can. Doing so oversimplifies the world." Baldwin talked about complexity. We have to enter in. When we do not, we become complicit in the downward spirals that surround us. It's important to not comply, to be true to our own heart, and being true to that still small voice within us that is showing us the way forward. How do you find the courage to do something like that? The inherent worth and dignity helps us to face this squarely. Sometimes we get estranged from ourselves and estranged from one another. The first principle helps us to bring us back to our senses. Now, Ani DeFranco is no Elvis Presley, unless, of course, in some ways she really is. She is Elvis Presley in the sense that she too is an artist who knows enough that sometimes we need to break free of something that we cannot name. Now, I don't know what Ani DeFranco would think of this comparison. I just know that she is courageous and she helps others to be. As we begin to consider the power and the meaning of our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, I wonder how this signpost will guide us forward, will call us on. I suspect that it will do so courageously. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.